The night had barely surrendered to dawn when the forest awoke with a shudder, a tremor so quiet that only the most attentive creatures sensed it. Mist clung to the ground like a fragile veil, drifting around the trees where shadows stretched into long, trembling fingers. And there, in a small clearing carved by time and rain, a newborn elephant struggled to find its balance beside its weary mother. He was small for his age, still coated in the faint fuzz of infancy, his steps uncertain, yet filled with a spark of curiosity that only the very young possess. The herd kept a loose circle around him, protective but relaxed, unaware that something ancient and patient had been watching them long before the sun considered rising. The python had moved through the underbrush with a silence that defied its massive size, guided by instinct sharpened through generations of survival. It sensed vulnerability, the delicate uncertainty of a creature still learning the world. Hunger was not its motive alone. Opportunity drove it, the way the earth itself instructed predators to read weakness like a whispered invitation. As the baby elephant wandered a few paces farther than he should have, nudged by a drifting leaf and the soft glow of morning light, the python coiled itself deeper into the brush, waiting for the moment the forest would look away. The mother noticed his distance only when she felt the subtle shift in the air, a tension that made her ears flare wide. She rumbled a soft warning, urging him back toward the safety of her shadow. But before he could respond, the ground erupted in a blur of movement and force. The python launched forward, its thick body surging with terrifying purpose, wrapping around the baby's legs and torso with crushing strength. The infant's cry echoed through the clearing, tremulous and sharp, a sound that pierced the hearts of every creature within hearing distance. Yet the python tightened its grip, relying not on speed, but on a terrible, methodical pressure intended to overwhelm its small victim's will. The forest froze. Birds stopped mid-song. Even the breeze seemed to falter. The herd turned in shock, their trumpets rising in a chorus of panic and fury. But panic alone did not break the python's hold. The mother charged, but the serpent's coils only locked faster, using the infant's body as a shield against the pounding of her feet. Every second grew heavier, every breath of the baby more strained. The forest, once peaceful, now throbbed with the pulse of despair and the threat of loss. And here, in this moment of suffocating fear, I want to ask you something as you watch this unfold. Feeling the same pressure tightening around your chest that the little elephant feels around his fragile body. Where are you watching this from? And do stories like this hit you as deeply as they do others who gather here? Your voice in the comments shapes the heart of this channel. And if you want more intense, emotional wildlife stories told with honesty and depth, make sure you subscribe right now. It truly helps keep these narratives alive. The mother elephant, trembling with rage and desperation, refused to retreat. She circled, searching for an opening, for one chance to wedge her tusk beneath the coils without harming the calf. But the python was experienced, shifting its enormous weight to counter every attempt, anchoring itself to the soil as though the earth itself was tightening around the baby. The calf's cries softened, not from surrender, but from the draining exhaustion of a fight he never asked for. The herd emitted deep, resonant rumbles that vibrated through the ground, a collective plea for intervention from forces unseen. But nature's balance rarely answers pleas with mercy. It answers with unexpected alliances, the kind born not from friendship, but from the unspoken rules carved into the bones of the wild. As the struggle intensified, something stirred in the distance, a sound so faint it blended with the rustle of leaves, yet so deliberate it cut through the chaos like a whispered promise. The forest seemed to sense it first, shifting its energy as though preparing for a second storm. Even the python paused for a fraction of a second, sensing a presence that disrupted its confidence. The mother elephant lifted her head. Her ears swept wide, and her body stiffened with sudden recognition. Another figure was moving through the trees, slow but unwavering, guided by a scent older than memory. The herd parted instinctively, forming a silent passage for a creature whose arrival carried a weight even predators respected. Still, the python tightened reflexively, refusing to relinquish the advantage it had fought so hard to claim. The baby shuddered, pressing what little strength remained against coils that felt immovable. But the newcomer did not rush. It moved with purpose, each step a declaration that the story unfolding in this clearing was about to change. The mother's posture softened, not with calm, but with the fragile edge of hope, the kind that trembles because it knows how easily it can be shattered. The python, sensing the shift, dug deeper into its instinct for self-preservation, yet it held its ground. It would not release its grip unless forced. And just when the forest seemed to hold its breath for too long, when the battle between despair and determination reached its breaking point, that figure finally emerged into the clearing, and everything changed. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. These stories are entirely fictional, crafted by artificial intelligence to inspire compassion and reflect the power of empathy in the natural world. They are meant to encourage good actions, awareness, and understanding. The figure that stepped into the clearing was enormous, its frame moving with the fluid grace of something ancient and deliberate. Dust clung to its skin, and its tusks, weathered and chipped, glinted faintly in the newborn light. It was an old bull elephant, one of the few remaining patriarchs of the herd, a creature whose mere presence commanded silence. He had spent years in solitude, wandering the outer fringes of the forest, emerging only when instinct or fate called him home. And now, drawn by the cries of his kin, he came forward with a purpose that trembled through the ground like a heartbeat too vast to ignore. The python sensed it immediately. Its coils tightened reflexively, though for the first time there was a flicker of hesitation in the movement. Predators, no matter how primal, could recognize a force beyond their control. The bull's shadow stretched across the clearing, swallowing the smaller shapes in its path. He approached slowly, trunk raised, testing the air with heavy, deliberate breaths. The mother elephant stepped aside just enough to make space, her eyes flicking between her trapped calf and the massive figure that had once led them through drought and fire. She knew what he intended even before he acted. With a soundless motion, the bull extended his trunk, brushing it gently across the calf's back as if to reassure him. The baby responded weakly, a small shiver of recognition that seemed to ignite something fierce and immovable in the bull's heart. Then, without warning, he lowered his head and charged. The impact was thunderous. The python, caught mid-shift, was hurled several feet into the air as the bull's tusk drove beneath its massive body. Dust exploded upward in a blinding cloud, the air vibrating with the raw force of ancient power meeting primitive hunger. The serpent hit the ground, thrashing, its tail slicing through the grass like a whip. The calf collapsed in exhaustion, gasping for breath, while the mother rushed forward to shield him. The bull didn't stop. His rage was monumental but controlled, channeled through every deliberate strike. Each stomp of his foot shattered branches, sending tremors through the ground. The python twisted, trying to recoil, but its injuries made escape impossible. For the first time, it hissed not in aggression, but in defense, its power draining with every passing second. The forest, which had been paralyzed moments earlier, now roared with life again. Birds shrieking into the sky, monkeys calling from treetops, even the wind rushing through the leaves as though cheering the act of salvation. And yet, despite his fury, the bull did not kill the python. He knew when the lesson had been given. The serpent slithered backward, battered but alive, dragging itself into the underbrush, where it would vanish like a ghost returning to its grave. The herd stood in tense silence, watching it disappear, their bodies still trembling from the echo of violence. The baby lay between his mother's legs, breathing shallow but steady, his small chest rising and falling as the light deepened around them. For a long moment, no one moved. The bull remained where he stood, sides heaving, the adrenaline of battle fading into the heavy calm that follows survival. His eyes met the mother's, an exchange without words, a bond forged not through dominance but through understanding. He had seen death, loss, and countless struggles in his long life, but this moment reminded him of something purer, the reason the herd endured at all. Protection, connection, the invisible thread that tied generations together through storms, droughts, and predators. Slowly, he turned back toward the calf, lowering his trunk once more. The baby reached up weakly, touching the bull's trunk with his own. The contact lasted only a heartbeat, but it carried the weight of a promise that as long as the herd existed, no child of theirs would fall alone. The mother nuzzled her calf, rumbling softly, a sound filled with gratitude and fierce love. The bull lingered for a moment, his gaze drifting toward the edge of the clearing where the forest thickened into darkness. He knew his time among them was temporary. Old bulls often moved in solitude, their wisdom carried like a whisper through the wind. But before he left, he lifted his trunk and released a deep, resonant call that rolled across the landscape, a sound both mournful and proud, a reminder to every living thing that the wild, for all its cruelty, still contained mercy. As the echoes faded, the sun finally broke through the canopy, spilling light onto the clearing. The rays glistened on the dust particles still floating in the air, transforming the scene into something sacred, a fleeting glimpse of balance restored. The calf stirred, standing shakily on his feet, supported by his mother's side. The herd gathered close, surrounding them in a protective circle once again, as if to erase the horror that had unfolded just minutes before. Yet even as peace returned, the memory of what had happened lingered. The forest never forgets. Every struggle, every cry, every act of courage is woven into its soil, passed down like a story whispered from root to root. Somewhere deep in the shadows, the python curled upon itself, licking its wounds and remembering too. It had failed today, but in the endless rhythm of life and death, it knew another opportunity would come, somewhere, sometime, where the weak and the strong would meet again. The bull watched the horizon for a long time before finally turning away. His footsteps were slow, deliberate, and with each one, the ground seemed to sigh beneath his weight. He was not merely leaving, he was fading, returning to that realm between presence and legend that only old elephants knew. The herd's eyes followed him until he was no more than a shifting shadow between trees. For the calf, his savior would become a story told in murmured rumbles under the moonlight, a tale of the day the giant returned from solitude to defend his kin. And somewhere in that story lies a truth we often forget: that courage is not born from strength alone, but from love that refuses to be silent. Even in the darkest corners of nature, where fear reigns and survival demands cruelty, moments of compassion rise like fragile lights in the mist. The bull did not save the baby for glory. He did it because the wild, though harsh, is held together by unseen threads of connection that we humans are only beginning to understand. As the sun climbed higher and the herd began to move once more, the mother looked back one last time, her gaze soft but heavy with memory. She nudged her child forward gently, urging him to stay close, to learn, to grow stronger. The baby, still trembling, took a step, then another. Each movement was an act of defiance against fear, a silent promise to live on and remember. If you felt something while hearing this story, that quiet ache in your chest, that stirring of wonder and sorrow, take a moment to stay with it. That emotion is the heartbeat of this channel, the reason these tales exist. Subscribe so you won't miss the next story, where the untamed beauty of the wild meets the fragile strength of compassion. Every story we share here carries that message. No matter how dark the world becomes, there's always light hidden within it, if we choose to see it. Far from the clearing, where the forest grew denser and the trees intertwined like ancient guardians, the python dragged its wounded body through the damp undergrowth. Every movement was slow, strained, a painful reminder of its defeat. The serpent's scales, once smooth and unbroken, now bore the marks of battle, streaks of dust, and the faint bruises left by the elephant's tusks. It had survived, but survival carried its own kind of punishment. Each breath reminded it that it had faced something beyond hunger, beyond instinct, a force of protection so absolute that even the most cunning predator could not overcome it. The forest, usually indifferent to such things, seemed to watch the serpent's retreat in silence. Nature, after all, doesn't judge. It remembers. The python slithered into the hollow of an old tree, its body coiling tightly in the shadows, and waited. It would heal. It would recover. But the echo of that encounter would stay carved in its instincts. Somewhere deep within the part of its mind ruled entirely by survival, a fragment of recognition remained, that some lives are guarded by something greater than chance. Back in the clearing, time began to flow again. The herd slowly resumed their movement, though their formation was tighter now, their senses heightened by what had just occurred. The baby elephant stayed pressed close to his mother's side, his small steps occasionally faltering as his body adjusted to the lingering pain. But his eyes, wide and filled with something both fearful and curious, stayed fixed on the path where the old bull had disappeared. Though the calf did not understand the full meaning of what had happened, he sensed something had changed, not just around him, but within him. As the herd marched on, they came across a shallow riverbed, shimmering beneath the early sun. The water was cool and clear, a thin ribbon of life winding through the wilderness. The mother led her child to the edge, lowering her trunk into the stream and spraying him gently, washing away the dust and fear that clung to his skin. The calf flinched at first, startled by the cold, but then relaxed into the rhythm of her touch. It was a quiet ritual, one older than memory. The cleansing after survival, the silent acknowledgement that life, once nearly lost, must now begin again. The other elephants joined them, their low rumbles resonating like a lullaby across the valley. They touched trunks, brushed shoulders, and moved in calm unison. A language older than words, a communion of hearts that had endured together. From afar, it looked like peace. But beneath that peace was vigilance. Every adult kept a watchful eye on the trees, their ears twitching at the faintest sound. The wild rarely offered second chances, and they would not waste this one. Hours passed, and as the day warmed, the calf grew more confident. He began to wander again, though never far, his playful splashes sending ripples across the water. The herd watched with quiet amusement, the heaviness of morning slowly melting into the rhythm of life returning to normal. The mother's eyes softened. For the first time since dawn, she allowed herself to breathe fully. She reached down and wrapped her trunk gently around her son, holding him for a long moment before letting go. It was as if she was saying what words could not. You are safe now. But never forget how close you came to being lost. In the branches above, a pair of hornbills watched, their calls echoing softly through the canopy. The forest was alive again, cautious but breathing. Every creature that had witnessed the struggle carried a piece of the story, a ripple of its energy flowing outward through the ecosystem. The jungle remembers not only death, but rescue. Every act of mercy, every moment of defiance against cruelty becomes part of its unspoken law. As dusk approached, the sky blazed with gold and crimson. The herd settled in a grassy meadow for the night, their bodies forming a massive ring around the calves. The baby nestled close to his mother, drifting towards sleep as the world hummed softly around him. But before the last light faded, something stirred at the edge of the trees. A sound, faint but distinct, the rhythmic tread of heavy feet. The mother lifted her head, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. The bull had returned. He did not enter the meadow fully this time, only stood at its border, his silhouette outlined against the bleeding sunset. The herd turned toward him, silent and reverent. He raised his trunk high, releasing a long, low call that rolled across the landscape. Not a warning, not a challenge, but a farewell. The sound reached the calf's ears, stirring him from his half-sleep. He blinked, lifting his head, and for a brief instant, their eyes met across the distance. The bull lowered his trunk slowly, then turned away, fading once again into the forest's shadow. The calf watched until the last trace of him was gone, then nestled back against his mother. The sound of crickets filled the silence that followed, and soon, only the steady rhythm of breathing remained. The night reclaimed the world, folding it into its dark, protective embrace. But the next morning, when the sun returned, something subtle had changed within the herd. They moved with renewed unity, a quiet strength born from what they had endured together. The calf's steps were steadier, his spirit unbroken. The python had nearly ended his life, yet that moment of terror had given birth to something greater: resilience. And in that resilience lay the foundation of survival for every creature in the wild. The forest carried on as it always did. Rain would fall, rivers would swell, and predators would hunt again. Yet somewhere beneath the surface of all that motion was the memory of one day when mercy triumphed over hunger, when an old giant answered the call of the helpless, and when a single act of courage rippled outward through the endless tapestry of life. If this moment moved you, if you felt the fear, the relief, the quiet triumph, then you understand the purpose behind stories like this. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Each tale we tell here is a reflection of that fragile, breathtaking balance that binds all living things. Sometimes it's not strength that saves us, but the heart that refuses to let go. When dawn returned once more, the forest greeted it with a fragile calm. The air was heavy with dew, and the cries of distant birds echoed between the trees like soft reminders that life, no matter how brutal, always finds a way to begin again. The herd had moved deeper into the plains overnight, guided by the matriarch's instinct and the soft pulse of memory that still lingered from the day before. The baby elephant, though still tender from his wounds, walked close beside his mother, his steps small but determined, his ears flicking with new alertness. Every rustle in the grass made him glance sideways now. Every shadow drew his attention. Fear had shaped him, but so too had courage. And deep inside, a spark had taken root, a quiet strength born from survival itself. The mother watched him constantly. Her eyes, tired but full of fierce devotion, followed his every movement. The image of the python's coils still haunted her. In every flicker of shadow, she saw that monstrous shape again, felt its threat return. Yet she refused to live in fear. The herd could not afford that. Their world was one of constant tests, where every sunrise carried both beauty and danger in equal measure. To be an elephant meant to remember, but also to keep walking. That morning, as the sun climbed higher, the plains shimmered with heat and light. The elephants traveled toward a grove where the grass grew taller, the earth rich with moisture. It was a sacred place for them, a sanctuary where generations had come to heal, to give birth, and to rest when the journey became too long. When they arrived, the herd spread out, their trunks sweeping through the long grass in graceful arcs. The baby reached down to pluck a few tender shoots, his small trunk clumsy but eager. He was learning again how to be a child. Yet, high above them, perched in the thick canopy of a tamarind tree, a family of langurs watched. They had witnessed the attack days earlier, and now observed the little elephant with something like admiration. In the language of the wild, every creature pays attention to the stories that unfold around them. Tales of danger and rescue passed through calls, scents, and movements. The langurs began to chatter softly, their voices blending with the rustling leaves, retelling what they had seen. The tale of the calf and the serpent spread across the canopy, from one branch to another, until even the farthest corners of the jungle seemed to hum with it, and somewhere, far away near the river's curve, a crocodile slid silently into the water, pausing as if listening. The wild has its own way of remembering heroes, not through monuments or songs, but through ripples of awareness, through instincts shaped by the echoes of survival. As midday came, the baby elephant strayed toward a patch of shallow mud and began to play. He rolled clumsily, coating himself in the thick, cooling earth, his squeals of delight carrying through the air. The herd relaxed at last, the tension that had shadowed them beginning to ease. For a moment, peace reigned. The forest was no longer a place of fear, but of renewal. The same ground that had nearly claimed the calf's life now offered him comfort. The mother watched with gentle pride, but her gaze drifted often to the horizon, toward the distant line of trees where the old bull had vanished. His image remained etched in her mind, his massive frame, the steady courage that had defied death itself. Elephants are creatures of memory. They carry the weight of every face, every sound, every act of love and loss. She would never forget him. None of them would. That night, under a moon as pale as bone, the herd gathered once again in a circle. The air was cool, filled with the song of crickets and the distant roar of a lion, softened by distance. The baby lay beside his mother, his body now fully at ease, his breathing steady. Around them, the adults swayed gently, their movements synchronized like a slow, ancient dance. The matriarch rumbled low, a sound that resonated through the earth, not a call of warning this time, but of remembrance. It was a ritual older than words, an offering to the spirits of the wild. They remembered the python, not with hate, but with understanding. Every predator has its purpose. Every struggle has its place in the great balance. And they remembered the bull, whose courage had reminded them that compassion was not weakness, but the very essence of strength. The calf stirred in his sleep, his small trunk curling as if reaching for something unseen. Perhaps in his dreams, he saw the great bull again, standing proud beneath the trees, his tusks gleaming under the moonlight. Perhaps he heard his voice rumbling softly through the air, saying the things only elephants can understand. That to live is to endure is to love, and to love is to protect. By morning, when the sun rose once more, the world seemed reborn. The herd began to move toward new feeding grounds, their silhouettes glowing gold in the dawn. The baby walked at the center now, no longer just a fragile life to be guarded, but a symbol of what the herd had survived together. The story of his rescue would become part of their lineage, passed down through generations in soft rumbles beneath the stars. And far behind them, unseen in the shadow of the trees, the python watched from a distance. Its body had healed enough to move, but something in its gaze had changed. It no longer saw the herd as prey. Instead, it regarded them with a kind of wary reverence, as if acknowledging the invisible boundary that now existed between them. The serpent turned away, disappearing into the forest's endless depths, its hunger replaced by something far more complex: respect. As the herd vanished into the horizon, the forest exhaled, a sigh of balance restored. The wind carried their scent across the plains, mingling it with the fragrance of rain-soaked earth and wildflowers. Life went on, just as it always had, just as it always would. But somewhere, deep within that cycle of life and death, there lingered the memory of one moment that transcended instinct. A moment when mercy rose above fear, when an old protector answered the silent call of the helpless, and when the wild itself seemed to pause, watching, learning. So if you've reached this far in the story, let this moment stay with you. The wild teaches us every day about courage, about connection, about the unseen bonds that hold everything together. And if this tale touched something in you, let that feeling guide you. Like the old bull who returned to save what others might have left behind, we too can choose to protect, to care, to act with heart. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment sharing where you're watching from and what part of this story moved you most. Every story here is a reminder that even in nature's darkest moments, light still finds a way through. Because kindness, in any form from anyone, always leaves a mark that never fades.